speaker today is Helen Ellis. She is the Head of Leadership and Development at PCC, which is a social enterprise, not-for-profit, supporting primary care across England and Wales. Helen has over 15 years experience, I'm sure it's probably more, delivering leadership training and coaching. And I know that Helen is really passionate about building confidence and capability, particularly for women leaders. So today, Helen, you're going to share your insights into the challenges women leaders face and how we can support better in our systems to help them to thrive. So please, everyone, welcome Helen. So let's get into it. What do you think are the key barriers that women face in primary care when they move to those leadership roles, particularly from clinical?
Yeah, no, thanks. Really nice to be here. Thanks, Carla. Well, you probably know the numbers. The latest workforce data still has over 70% of all NHS employees are women. In fact, I think it's 76%, the most recent. 90% of all nurses, that's across secondary and primary care. But those numbers drop way down to well under 50 when we look at senior or very senior roles. So something's happening. So for instance, clinically, couple of examples, 36% of consultants are women and only 13% of surgeons are women. Primary care does a bit better. Over 50% now of GPs are women, and the workforce generally, if we go back to that nurses stat, obviously that is reflected in primary care. But again, it's a lower number when you look at partnerships and a lower number when you look at now PCN leadership, for instance, or board level participation. I think the answer to your question really is still about stereotypes and perception. So you could say that's global, not just NHS and not just primary care. So there's still those stereotypes around the caring role or potential caring role, because not all women have children or caring responsibilities, but there is still that stereotype, I'm going to use that word. Will they get pregnant? Will they take mat leave? Will they leave? Will they ask for flexible working? And the subtext there is, will they be committed enough to be a leader for my organisation? Or will I invest in them and that investment not be suitably met? I think also when you mention clinical staff, so clinicians know how stretched the workforce is from the inside, right? So there is this sort of sense of apology and guilt that they may then contribute further by asking for promotion or to do better at work and then need time back.
Yeah.
The reality, I think, is until workforces better accommodate the changing needs or potential changing needs of women, then they are still likely to leave before they progress into those leadership roles, which is where that disparity comes. And we really need them there, don't we? We need women in healthcare to be in senior roles. We need them to be making decisions, influencing, so that they can advocate for women in the community and women's health generally, quite apart from obviously the equality issue.
Absolutely. So have you seen that gender bias showing up in sort of, I know we're not talking HR here, I know we're not giving HR advice at all today, but have you seen that showing up in hiring or promotion? And how should leaders be addressing that when they notice that happening?
Yeah, so anecdotally, my experience shows that women approach applications and interviews from a more anxious position. So they're thinking about what they can't do, which bits of the person spec they may not quite match. Whether that's a confidence issue, and it's, you know, you'll probably hear me say the word confidence several times in the next 10 minutes, that showing off element that is required when you go for a job, right? Whether that's somewhat less well developed, or they don't recognise the transferable skills. So they may have been out of the workforce for a few years and actually probably what they've been doing in that time, again, even if it isn't about raising family, whatever they have been doing will be relevant and will have transferable skills. There's that sense of apology. If I go for that job, I might need to ask for support in a different way than my male counterparts. And we all feel it. We are all participating in that. So we really need to encourage that process to be more about their dual role and the value that is offered rather than what we're not bringing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I see my sister, she has 3 children, and she kind of like hides that at interviews at times. She's really reluctant to kind of say that, but actually, bringing those 3 children up, it has been a massive learning curve for her, and probably one of the biggest in her life, she would say, you know, despite any role.
Project
I think that's
management
really
skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in your experience, how do other factors that, you know, contribute around like equality, so race, background, how do they also affect women's leadership experiences in primary care?
So that intersection's really valid, wherever that, as you say, whatever it is, whether it's race or any other intersection. And I think my answer here is similar to the previous answers. I think, again, that's about confidence, the perception. So I've run some action learning sets and group coaching programs with global majority women nurses and midwives, and their experience was often based on previous bad experience. So whether it was their own bad experience, they don't want to be seen as demanding or pushy. And I'm going to come back to language, I'm sure, because I think the language is really important. That why not? Like, why are those words somehow associated in a negative sense to women? We don't necessarily say them at all about men. So we need to share positive stories, rather that lift as we climb idea, rather than how difficult it is. Something about sharing successes, building each other up. We can do that through formal and informal networking. And if you think about it, you probably know these people too. I still know GPs, for instance, women GPs who will say, well, I'm just a GP. And you're like, no, you're not just a GP. You're looking at a national role or a board membership or some other directorship. You're not just a GP. And there's something about that language, again, that we need to be addressing, I think.
Yeah, and if we can't talk about ourselves in that way, then it's really hard, isn't it? If you're in a leadership position, might not be the leadership position, but then to encourage other people not to use that language as well is so important. So what types of mentorship or like sponsorship, thinking like coaching as well, have you found most helpful for women leaders?
So creating really safe networks, spaces, listening groups, all sorts of different languages used, but essentially it's the same thing. Genuinely saying you can attend or join and listen and share and have solution-focused opportunities. Identifying allies. So again, it's that lift as you climb idea. We need women leaders to share their story, their journey, and kind of open doors for each other. Because they are there, just that the numbers are fewer, but they are there, you know. So actually, is it their responsibility to, I mean, I'm sort of saying it is, to be there and bring others along behind us. So truly listening, pushing, opening doors for each other. That works online and face-to-face. So it could be within your own team or organisation, or you can access reciprocal mentoring, for instance, that can be across organisational boundaries, which I think is also really important. And I would say this, women coaches for women is a really useful tool. Almost giving women permission to say, you know, this isn't men bashing or gender fixating at all, but giving women permission to say, I think I'm finding this hard or harder, and I think it's because I'm a woman at work. And may or may not be true, but if it's how it feels, then having space to talk that through with somebody is really important.
Yeah, focusing on your own lane and what things are getting in the way of you doing what you want to do, your own aspirations. I think that's really key, because it's such a massive topic, isn't it, around gender bias and things like that, that you could get swamped with what's going on in you know, in loads of different theories around that. So I think that's a really that important. Helen, like, what are you doing for you and what are you finding difficult for you? That's so individual.
Yes,
So
exactly.
what organisational policies have you seen that really do support women that are balancing these leadership responsibilities, maybe clinical, that sort of family demand, things that are expected of women or tend to happen in women's lives that's different from men? What have you seen that supports them the best?
Well, policies are really important, and what good EDI policies will have, obviously, support and inclusive directives for women generally, but we also need to think about what our organisations providing. So the Leadership Academy actually commissioned us to provide some confidence building leadership development for PCN lead nurses in the Northwest a couple of years ago now. And that was about finding your voice, professional visibility, going to the meeting. Well, firstly, getting invited to the meeting, then going, then speaking, then making sure you're heard. So really taking that all the way through, if you see what I mean. So that kind of programme and support, I think, is really important. Flexible working. So being creative and meaning it. So we don't feel the need to apologise if we need to leave early. And I have a really quick story about that. An ambulance service employee who had her contracted working hours altered so that she could pick up children at the end of school. And she worked in a team who consistently teased her and made comments about her leaving early. So the burden is either on her to accept that and be somehow somebody that leaves early, or to constantly say, I'm not leaving early. These are my contracted working hours. And in brackets, it's none of your business why I'm choosing to work these out. So there's always that slight burden that you have to explain and or apologise. Women GPs are ever more negotiating part-time flexible working, but we're still hearing about them choosing to leave the profession as well. So something about that isn't enough. And I think we need to be creative around what flexible working might really look like. And it isn't just women with caring responsibilities, as I said at the beginning. I think some of that is around boundaries setting and how difficult it is to say no. And maybe GPs, for instance, then are going to provide more cover or agree to add more sessions to their workload, where their male counterpart might be more comfortable saying no to that option.
We're going to stop it there because it's our 10 minutes. And what we do now is we allow for open conversation. So we've got a few people on the chat. We've got 13 of you, and we've got one in the chat